Since its trailer was released, Emerald Fennell's 2026 film adaptation of the classic Gothic novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte incited rageful discourse on the internet. From the lead actors being much older than the characters in the book, to the historically inaccurate costume design based on vibes alone, this adaptation violently blurs the line between the text itself and a director's vision. But it is the final tier of online criticism of this adaptation that carries more consequence. This criticism relates to the casting of Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. There is enough in the text, the subtext, and in the historical context to support the theory that Heathcliff of Wuthering Heights is not a white character. The whitewashing of the character of Heathcliff in a Wuthering Heights on-screen adaptation is nothing new. There have been around 10 adaptations of Wuthering Heights over the years, and in all but one, Heathcliff was played by a white actor. Most notable of all these adaptations is the 1939 black and white adaptation directed by William Wyler, starring Merle Oberon as Cathy and Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff. Jacob Elordi is a white Australian actor. Heathcliff's appearance has a lot more to do with the way he is ill-treated and, in effect, how he treats others. Race and social class are major themes in the novel. Although Emily Bronte leaves the exact details of Heathcliff's race and ethnicity unclear, there are more than enough suggestions that allude to Heathcliff being very non-white in his appearance. Michael Stewart, the director of the UK-based Bronte Writing Centre, shared in a recent Forbes article that he felt, quote, quite strongly that Emily's intention was that Heathcliff was either black or mixed race, and there are lots of clues in the text to suggest that. There are also theories that Heathcliff is Romani because of him being called a particular derogatory term many times in the book. Romani people are a displaced ethnic group that originated from the Indian subcontinent, thus giving them South Asian roots. Heathcliff is also called Alaska in the book, which is a term that was used for a sailor from India or Southeast Asia. In the book, the character of Nellie speculates about Heathcliff's mysterious non-white background when she says, "You're fit for a prince in disguise. Who knows, perhaps your father was Emperor of China and your mother an Indian queen, and you were kidnapped by wicked sailors and brought to England." The 18th and 19th centuries in England were more racially diverse than many people realize. The fact that Heathcliff is found in Liverpool, described as an orphan with no owner or belonging to anybody, opens up the possibility that Heathcliff could have been of black African descent, having been brought to Liverpool through the slave trade. Mr. Earnshaw's choice to simply call him Heathcliff is also reminiscent of the single name enslaved people were given. This act of violence removed an individual's identity and forcibly made enslaved people forget their origins. There is also a lot of description in the book on how Heathcliff as a child would endure violent attacks by the character of Hindley as if he had experienced this kind of abuse before, reminiscent of what enslaved or indentured people experienced. But it's not just about the text. Hollywood's history and its subsequent legacy of excluding actors and actresses of color runs deep. And for Wuthering Heights specifically, the story runs deeper. In this video essay, I am going to juxtapose the continued whitewashing of Heathcliff with the story of Merle Oberon, who played the role of Cathy in the 1939 adaptation of Wuthering Heights. What many people do not know is that Merle Oberon passed as white for her entire life. She was in fact a mixed-race woman. Her father was a British man and her mother was Indian. Merle self-identified for the first part of her life as Anglo-Indian. She was born in Bombay in British colonial India and lived out her childhood in British colonial India. The racial connotations of casting a white actor like Jacob Elordi in the role of Heathcliff is made even more egregious when I delve into how Merle Oberon and other non-white actors and actresses had to survive in Hollywood while experiencing ongoing racial prejudice, discrimination, and colorism, much like Heathcliff experiences in the novel. Merle Oberon's decision to pass as a white woman was based on the discrimination and shame she would have faced as a working actress if she were outed as a woman of color in the 1930s and 1940s. Merle Oberon would not have been chosen for leading roles if her mixed-race identity was known to the public. The Hays Code in Hollywood barred interracial couples from being depicted on screen. In fact, during Merle's era of the 1930s, anti-miscegenation laws, or laws banning white people from marrying black people and other non-white people, existed in many states in the US. Merle Oberon was nominated for an Oscar in 1936 at the 8th Academy Awards. She attended the awards ceremony with her then boyfriend boyfriend, Clark Gable. She didn't win that night, but in retrospect, she did make history. Merle Oberon, then 24, became the first performer of color and Asian woman to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. But Merle never got to bask in her achievement's historic importance. No one else knew her secret. Whenever questions arose about why her tan never seemed to fade, Merle Oberon parroted the cover story that a film production company invented for her, that she was born to well-heeled white parents on the Australian island of Tasmania. The suits at London Films, believing she was light-skinned enough to pass for white, willfully erased the fact that her mother was South Asian and that Merle had grown up in poverty in what was then Calcutta. Estelle Merle Thompson was born in Bombay in 1911. She was called Queenie Thompson as a child in British colonial India. Her mother had Sri Lankan Sinhalese roots and her white British father was absent from her life. Merle was categorized as Anglo-Indian in British colonial India. Prior to the implementation of the category of Anglo-Indian for mixed-race people like Merle, Merle would have been categorized as Eurasian in British colonial India. Merle self-identified as Anglo-Indian, and the term Anglo-Indian is accurate to the historical and geographical context to her upbringing in India rather than Sri Lanka. Anglo-Indians faced their own type of discrimination and isolation in British colonial India. They were not white, so the ruling class, being the British, did not accept them in their social circles. During the Indian independence movement, Indians considered them to be subservient to the British as a result of their mixed race. Merle was forced to deal with this prejudice regarding her race even in her homeland. During India's silent film era, Jewish people and Anglo-Indians dominated Indian cinema as films were not considered to be a respectable profession for Indian Hindu and Muslim women. Merle would have seen the movies as a way to overcome her circumstances. During the 1920s and 1930s, many Anglo-Indians immigrated to England to try to assimilate to white British society for better opportunities. Merle was the same. When she started getting roles in British films in the 1920s, she was at first typecast as an exotic woman. Think a mysterious Spanish, French, or Egyptian lady. She had jet black hair, slightly tanned skin, dark eyes, and a crooked smile. Her appearance was very different from her later contemporaries like Katharine Hepburn, Greta Garbo, and Bette Davis. Throughout her career, critics attacked her appearance. She was called too oriental, and the slant of her eyes were pointed out in film reviews. There was a lingering doubt in film circles regarding her story of her white heritage, and her race was a matter of constant speculation in the press. She was even blackmailed by gossip columnists who wanted to expose her as a mixed-race woman. Merle was able to keep her racial identity a secret simply because she was well-liked by the right people, powerful people in Hollywood and in British films. Heads of production companies would pay off journalists who wanted to break the story of her race, and more influential gossip columnists in Hollywood became her good friends. Some directors of the time, who were also hiding their own racial identities, knew about her secret. They protected and supported her by casting her in their films. She would either play roles as an ethnically ambiguous temptress or an English rose. When she decided to become a working actress, Merle needed a stage name. She wanted to shed any evidence of her racial identity from her past. An ex-boyfriend actually suggested the last name Oberon to her, alluding to the medieval king of fairies in William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Also, Oberon sounded very European. Merle Oberon was Hollywood's first South Asian star, but her greatest performance was perhaps hiding her true racial identity, and it was sadly a secret that she had to take to her grave. When Merle started working in Hollywood, the racial dynamics were much more dangerous for her as a white passing woman. She was under more intense scrutiny in Hollywood. Upon Merle's arrival, the press began to print speculation that her mother was a Hindu. Hindu was a byword in the American vernacular for any South Asian, regardless of religious creed. It was also a racial category sanctioned by the American government in 1930. Earlier in the 20th century, anxieties about the, quote, dusky peril, unquote, posed by South Asian immigrants threatening the sanctity of white labor gripped the American psyche, feeding a climate of bigotry. The U.S. Immigration Act of 1917 was best known for its creation of a barred zone where South Asian, Middle Eastern, and Southeast Asian immigrants were not allowed to enter the United States. 6 years after this law, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that any South Asian immigrants residing in American borders would be ineligible for naturalization, and the government revoked the citizenship status of South Asians who had already become citizens. By the time Merle arrived in the States in 1934, Americans were content to imagine South Asians as turbaned mystics or uncivilized primitives. Yet, simmering beneath these romantic stereotypes was a xenophobic belief that they were fundamentally unassimilable. Also, unfortunately for Merle, the year that she arrived in America was the year in which the Hays Code was enforced in Hollywood. The Hays Code was a set of conservative guidelines self-imposed by Hollywood studios regulating the content of films produced from 1934 to 1968. The Hays Code curbed the depiction of, amongst other things, homosexuality, promiscuity, and miscegenation, meaning the depiction of interracial couples on screen. This was defined within the text as between black and white races, but it was interpreted to include all actors and actresses of color. The Hays Code limited the types of roles available to capable and talented non-white actors and actresses. As a result, white actors and actresses of the time chose to portray people of color in blackface, brownface, or yellowface. Alternatively, non-white performers like Sabu would rely on a public persona that fed into South Asian stereotypes in order to work. This was the film industry in which Merle found herself, a film industry that took great pains to dehumanize and exclude performers of color. Merle acted in a Hollywood film in which she shared an on-screen kiss with the lead actor. If her true racial identity was known, this would have never been allowed. The standards of that era did not allow for on-screen interracial kissing. Had audiences known Merle was anything other than white, she would have been exiled to a career of playing temptresses and domestics, a supporting actress on a film's narrative margins. In fact, if it was discovered that she was mixed race and born in Bombay, Merle could have been deported from the US. In order to be eligible for leading lady roles and to maintain her under-the-radar status with US immigration authorities, Merle tried to maintain a pale skin tone to pass as white. This was the most realistic approach for her to achieve her dream of being a famous working actress. But rumors regarding her race persisted. She was called racist names by actresses who were her colleagues. The female stars who dominated Hollywood in that era were, unsurprisingly, almost exclusively white. This established Hollywood's beauty standard as white. Merle's ethnically ambiguous look was a threat to that hegemony. Jean Harlow was the only actress who treated her with some compassion. Hollywood studios made Merle undergo skin bleaching treatments if she appeared too tan. Besides beauty standards, lighting equipment for black and white films of the 1930s and 1940s required Merle to maintain a pale skin tone. But being featured in black and white films allowed her to keep her secret as well. In an example of absurd irony, Merle has been quoted as saying that she detested exotic women and she distanced herself in the press from her fellow Asian contemporary Anna May Wong. But when Technicolor was introduced to films, Merle faced a lot of stress. She could not hide in the glow of black and white movies any longer. She lost out on a role to the German actress Marlene Dietrich simply because filmmakers did not like the way Merle looked in color. After she did multiple color tests, she sued the filmmakers in this instance. Towards the end of her life, Merle wanted to apply for an American citizenship, to truly belong to the country that made her a star. When she was informed that she needed to present her birth certificate or a baptismal certificate as a part of the process, she backed out. She would have had to reveal the secret of her racial identity. Merle grew up in an era when a sense of shame surrounded her racial identity, both in her homeland and as a working actress in Hollywood. It was a system that fostered her need to live a lie in order to succeed as an actress. Wuthering Heights was Merle Oberon's most well-known role. In order to upkeep her lie, she wanted roles like the English Rose and Kathy was perfect. Merle's beauty and charm took her very far in her career, but with this role she wanted to prove her acting skills. The film script would position Cathy as a porcelain beauty, while describing the man she loves as a dark-skinned, saturnine-looking figure. These words resembled the way journalists had once written about Merle. Laurence Olivier took his craft so seriously that he also caked himself in grubby makeup, darkening his skin and essentially adopting brown face to get into character. Cathy's affinity towards Heathcliff, that she cannot express to the outside world, is not unlike Merle's lifelong off-screen struggle to accept who she was and where she came from. Merle's work in the film becomes richer and infinitely more moving with this subtext in mind. This may explain why the performance today still stands as Merle's claim to fame. And that brings us to the topic of Wuthering Heights today. What is bizarre is that Emerald Fennel cast a South Asian man to play Edgar Linton, the white man who Cathy marries in the book. Shahzad Latif is a British actor of mixed heritage, born to a Pakistani father and an English-Scottish mother. He is arguably a better choice for Heathcliff than Jacob Elordi if the text is to be considered for a 2026 adaptation. Dev Patel is another actor who would be a really interesting choice for Heathcliff. Emerald Fennel was clear in a recent Fandango interview that she wanted to make her version of Wuthering Heights, the one that she, quote, remembered reading as a teenager, unquote. That, quote, is not quite real, unquote. I'll put the link to the interview in the description box below. She also shared in that interview that her choice for casting Jacob Elordi was because in the film Saltburn, he had sideburns, and this reminded her of the Heathcliff that appeared on the cover of her Wuthering Heights book that she owned as a teenager. And when she shared those details, everything clicked into place. Reading Wuthering Heights as a teenager with no further critical analysis of the material would result in the idea that the story is just about a torrid and tumultuous love affair, because those are the most obvious parts of the text. That is seemingly the focus of the 2026 adaptation.
Are you a horny 18 to 42-year-old with 16 bucks burning a hole in your pocket? Do you want to watch Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi do softcore and maybe a little hardcore for 2.5 hours? Don't let your popcorn be the only thing getting drenched at the movie theater. You're going to want to bring a second seat. The first one's going to get soaked. Are there some inaccuracies for the time? Sure. But this is 50 Shades of Grey if it took place in the 1800s. Was this the author's original intention? Who cares? Did I hear the word tension? Experience tension the way it was meant to be experienced. In IMAX.
But when we delve into the history and the subsequent legacy of why complex roles like Heathcliff were given to white performers in Hollywood, to the exclusion of non-white performers, while recounting the abuse faced by non-white actors and actresses, forcing many, like Merle Oberon, to lie about their racial identity, this casting choice in 2026 is made more egregious. Claire O'Callaghan, a Bronte scholar who is the editor-in-chief of the academic journal Bronte Studies, shared that she feels Fennell casting a white man, quote, overlooks the ambiguity that's in the book, unquote. O'Callaghan noted, part of the horror of the first part of the book is that Emily Bronte shows the abuse of the outsider. The concept of being the, quote, outsider, unquote, and othering is integral to Wuthering Heights and the character of Heathcliff because of his racial ambiguity. It intensifies his place as an outsider and his overall sense of isolation. Ironically, this is the legacy and the fate that many non-white performers of color faced in the past in Hollywood. They were treated as outsiders, even those who passed as white, like Merle Oberon, who, despite reaching the heights of Hollywood success, had to fight to keep her secret regarding her racial identity. Let me know if you're going to watch this adaptation. I will be watching because I still want to see what Emerald Fennel does with this. So I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next one.